Coach Gary Williams. Thanks for joining us. Coach, let's start right away. What did you see from the Terps on Monday night against Manhattan, specifically Derik Queen? Give us the basketball coach analysis.
Well, I was there. I wanted to see Derik Queen. I wanted to see the team, obviously, too. But Derik Queen's unique because he's that 6'9", 6'10" size. It's kind of the new breed of player that's very comfortable playing on the three-point line, as well as being able to post up. It used to be, you had a good inside player. You want him to stay on the block, that type of thing. But in Queen, he has a lot of things he can do that can really help you from the perimeter. So he can go out, be comfortable facing. He can get a rebound, put it down a couple times in the dribble, make a 50-foot pass to a guy going in for a layup. He's got a lot of things that make him a complete player, which is unusual for a guy his age. He's young, he's a freshman, and yet he plays at a much more mature level.
Do you recall a time as a coach that you had a freshman have that dominant of a performance in their debut? And just what does that say about him? He looked pretty comfortable on Monday. What does that say about him and how that bodes for the rest of the season, the way he looked on Monday?
Yeah, in 1994, I had a freshman named Joe Smith who became the number one pick in the draft his sophomore year. He had 27 points and 12 rebounds against number 13 Georgetown in an overtime win. So it was a little different competition against Georgetown than it was against Manhattan. And Joe nobody knew who Joe was. Queen, nowadays guys come in with so much advanced publicity, which Joe Smith, nobody knew who he was. He was a guy named Joe Smith. And, that was our first game. That was a TV game, which was a big deal back then. It was a day after Thanksgiving on ESPN when nobody else was playing. And so there was a lot of things that made that good. Now Queen, you look at his first game, you saw no signs of him being nervous, anything like that. He looked very adjusted to the attention that he got pregame and all those things that come along with being a Maryland basketball player. So his future really looks good.
Coach, how do you expect Kevin Willard to use? I mean, I know that when you coach, it's a little different in terms of spacing and things like that, but a too big system is really, I mean, Queen is so talented that you have to make it work, but it's not as common as we used to see. How would you go about playing Queen and Reese together? Because Willard talked about the challenges it brings, especially with foul trouble and things like that.
Well, it's you need a third guy that you can rotate. So if you do start both big guys, which I think is a great way to go given their talent, then you have that third guy. If a guy gets two quick fouls, say at the start of the game, you have the third guy you can bring in, let the guy rest for a couple minutes, and then bring him back in the game when he calms down or whatever. And so as long as you can find that third guy, I don't have any problems with starting both guys because they're the two best inside players. So, people say that all the time. Well, you shouldn't play both big guys. Well, if they're two of your best five players, let's get serious. You play your best players. You don't worry what people say. You do what's best for your team. And I think, Kevin certainly has the experience, coming from the Big East, things like that, 2 years at Maryland. He knows that. And, he'll figure out a way to accomplish that without putting the team in jeopardy.
I want to look over at the schedule a little bit. Obviously, when you were coaching, Maryland did not have to take so many trips to the West Coast, very few at that. When you look at the start of the Maryland schedule, I'm not sure how much you've looked into it, but Maryland doesn't have to get on a plane for over a month until they go face Purdue on December 8th. How important for that as a team to be able to play so many home games and kind of gel as a group in the first month of the season?
I think that helps with when you have new players like Maryland does, and you're trying to get things to play a certain way for the rest of the season, not just for the Manhattan game or whatever. You're still trying. You've got the next two games to really work on some things before you hit, I believe it's Marquette, in a very tough game. But playing at home certainly is an advantage, but we've got to get the students out. Monday night, you can't tell me all the students were studying on a Monday night. I worked at colleges for 42 years. Come on, give me a break. All of a sudden, everybody got smart. Let's get serious here. Get the students to the game because here's why. When you get into the Big Ten schedule, every place you'll play has a great home court because most Big Ten campuses are isolated. Forget the West Coast schools, but the traditional Big Ten schools are isolated. It's the only show in town. So you either go to the basketball game or you don't have much to do that night. And so we need the support from our students. That wasn't right for opening game with especially with a player like Derik Queen, who anybody that knows anything in the country about college basketball wants to see him play. Well, our students had a chance to see him play, and they got to get there. They got to be there, and hopefully they're there for the Mount St. Mary's game.
I wanted to ask what you saw from two transfers, their debuts on Monday night as well, Jacoby Gillespie and Rodney Rice. Jacoby filling in that point guard role now this season at 16 points, 5 assists, and then Rodney Rice off the bench, 12 points, hit 2 threes. What do you think that their additions can do for the team this season?
Well, Gillespie really impressed me. The numbers you just said obviously were, for a point guard, very good. But his defense, he was playing against a tough guard. You play a game like Manhattan, and they might not be as good as you, but they always have those 5'10", 5'11" guys that are really quick, that can really go with the ball. And he did a very good job with that. And that's going to be big. Your point guard has to be able to stop the ball a lot of times in transition. And I think Gillespie really showed last night that he has that ability to be able to do that. Rodney Rice, the funny thing about Rodney Rice, I coached his father for a year at Boston College. And his dad transferred to Richmond and had a very good career at Richmond. And Rodney comes in known as a shooter, but he hasn't played for a year and a half, basically. So he needs the game reps. And I think we all could see how much better he played in the second half as opposed to the first half. And that's going to happen, especially when you have a new team with 6, 7 new players trying to fit everybody together. And, people think everything should be perfect that first game. That first game is completely different than any exhibition game or scrimmage. It counts, number one. And number two, the nerves are there, which might not have been there for other games. So it takes a while to get through that. And I think Maryland really came out the second half and just showed where they can be. Now the key is for any team, not just Maryland, is to get that more toward 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And so I think you'll see that against Mount St. Mary's, that effort to try to play at an elite level, for going toward 40 minutes.
Coach Willard talked to. I mean, he played 10 guys in the first half, which I think is a very season opener like rotation. And said he hasn't really figured it out yet what he's looking at. When do you expect him, and when would you go about kind of trimming your rotation down? Is it Big Ten plays at that Marquette game? And how do you go about that? Are you just playing a bunch of different bodies to see, what they do on the floor? Is it just a practice thing? Like, how do you kind of figure out which guys you trust to get on the floor?
Well, that's really a good point. You have to find out who the game guys are. In other words, some guys look really good in practice. All of a sudden, you turn on the scoreboard, people come to the games, and they're not as good. Other guys don't play as well in practice, but play better in games. And so you have to find that out. And these first 3 games will really help Maryland because when you go against Marquette, you want your rotation. You want to have 8 guys. For me, if I could get to 8, I'd be a happy coach because we pressed a lot and we needed more than 5. But you get past 8 and it gets hard. Like you keep looking down the bench. Well, that guy should be playing or that guy, and it's a cruel world sometimes. So you have to earn your way in practice before you can show what you do in the game. So that was always my theme when I was coaching. Look, I'm going to make some decisions here that guys aren't going to be popular with, but I'm going to do them to the best of my ability, watching what you guys do in practice every day. And then the games, the first 3 games. How do you respond to the game pressure, the game situation? And so you can, like I said, Kevin's been around. He'll get it down to where he's comfortable with the rotation. And it'd be nice if you can do it by Marquette, but that's not necessarily going to make or break your season if you don't have a rotation by the Marquette game.
You just mentioned how you love to press. Kevin Willard has mentioned already this season that's something he's really going to focus on. Given what you saw on Monday night and what you know about this roster, how do you think this team sets up to press?
Well, I think the quickness is there. Even starting 2 big players, uh, Reese certainly has the ability to react in a pressure defense situation. Queen also shows that, he's a student of the game. He knows how to read double teams, things like that, which are important if you're a pressing team. And so I think pressing with the depth that they do have, now that this is the other thing, you can press in practice. And see, that's the only way you get good as a pressing team is to press in practice. And if you only have 7, 8 guys that are any good, then practice, it's kind of one-sided. You can't really get a feel. But when you have 10 guys, you can go 5-on-5 in practice, both teams pressing, both good pressing teams, then you find out. Then you get good as a pressing team. And I think that's the advantage this year that Kevin Willard has.
Coach, what's your biggest concern with this team?
Biggest concern is like I think a lot of teams now with transfer portals, the NIL, how do you get new guys every year to fit in and to blend? In other words, they have a situation where they're going to have to play new guys, and that's true with say 70% of the teams in the country. Very few teams, have that 4 or 5 player returning situation, which you used to have. You used to be able to do that, but now guys leave, guys come, for different reasons. A lot of it's NIL, but a lot of it's just believing that they'll get more minutes somewhere else. And, a coach only can control certain things. And adding the NIL and the transfer portal has taken away some control for the coaches, which isn't a good thing, speaking as a coach. Now, we'll see how it goes, but I think that's going to be the big thing, how quick everybody can adjust to each other. And, you go through some tough things in practice, that people don't see. Players have to learn how to get along with everybody, for example. I remember when we had Steve Blake as our point guard and John Gilchrist came in, those guys actually fought in practice one time. And that's, you don't like to see that, but at the same time, it shows you that they really care. They both wanted to play. And so that's with new players. You have to go through that. You have to get through a process where people respect each other. You don't have to like everybody, but you have to respect everybody. And that's the key.
Coach, I wanted to touch on NIL for a second. A lot of heralded coaches have retired recently. Some of them, it was a little earlier than expected. Of course, Jay Wright a few years ago at Villanova, Tony Bennett at Virginia most recently. And that changed landscape of college sports has been a factor. How do you think that these shifts with NIL have affected the demands and pressures of college coaches today compared to when you were coaching at Maryland?
Well, it's different. There's no doubt about it. You have to have money if you want to be successful now for the NIL. You can't. People would like to say, "Well, we believe in the old school," and that's all nice and all that. But a kid is going to make his decision based on how much he can make most of the time. Let's get serious. Rah rah for the old school. It's not out there anymore. It's more okay. How much are you going to give me is the first question you're asked in a recruiting visit, and so you don't have to like it, but if you want to be a coach today, you have to accept that's part of the deal of coaching. And coaches are making a lot of money, doing what they do. And a lot of schools now have gone to almost hiring a general manager where that guy's in charge of NIL, transfer portal, keeping up to date on all those things. So they can come in a meeting with a head coach and say, okay, this is where we are. This is what we have left in the NIL transfer portal. This is the guys that we might be interested in. And it saved the coach all that preliminary time. And I think that's what coaches need right now. They need somebody, and they have more people in the staff now. So they need people that can give them information that's, cutting away all the garbage that you usually have to go through to make a decision.
Despite all those hurdles and things you have to jump through now to get a player in terms of NIL, and the first question you said they're going to ask is how much they're going to get paid. Maryland was able to recruit Derik Queen and get him to College Park. So I have to ask you, how would you like to, coach Derik Queen if you'd had him on your roster in that time when you were here?
I'd love to coach him. And I think I'd be in the same situation as uh, Coach Willard is right now. You're finding out something every day that Derik Queen can do. Uh, he made a pass the other night against Manhattan. I don't know if anybody got excited about it, but I did. He got a rebound, took 2 dribbles, and threw like a 50-foot pass right on the money, like a quarterback does in football. And you don't have many inside players playing in the NBA that can make that play. And, so you find out about your players. And that was the thing with Joe Smith, what I was talking about with the Georgetown game. I saw him go against Othell Harrington, who was an All-American back then for Georgetown. And I go, wow, he can do all those things against a really good player. And so that's the next step with Derik Queen is, okay, when we play Marquette, they're going to have big guys that are aggressive, strong, try to bump you a lot of times when you get on the block. And, some teams don't have that ability because they don't have the big guys. And now you watch how Queen reacts to that. So it's going to be a learning process for a while. I'd say the month of December, you get a couple Big Ten games, you get Marquette, you get Villanova. You're going to really have a good feel, not just for Queen, but for the team as you get into January and, most of your Big Ten games.
Well, guys, there's nobody better to talk to us about Maryland hoops and coaching strategies than Gary Williams. So all that insight, you can find it under the shelf. Coach Williams, we really appreciate your time. Hope to see you around College Park as you were on Monday. And thank you so much for hopping on.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate being on, and I still get excited when I see those games, and the crowd. We've got to get the crowd. Whatever you guys can do, see that's going to be decisive in the Big Ten because you look at the Big Ten this year, it's pretty even. There's no one team like Purdue last year with Edie that you say, well, they're the best team. No, I think Maryland's right in there with you can put 7, 8 teams probably in that top tier, and Maryland's one of them. But if we don't have the same crowd as the other schools do, that's really going to affect our ability to be successful. So thanks.